Hi, my name is Ramesh Soni, and I will briefly talk about project management and show you a couple of examples and the mechanics of doing those things. So what is a project? Project is not something that is routine, that you do every day. Project is basically unique, complex project, complex set of activities uh, which require interrelated activities. They have deadlines, they require resources, and you don't do it every day. Uh, Examples: launching a new product for a company is a project. When Microsoft launched operating system 8.0, Windows 8.0, it was a project. It required lots of time to complete the project, lots of coordination, lots of teams sitting all over the world, from Ireland to Israel to India to the state of Washington and so on. Olympic Games is an example of a project. Construction of a building is a project. You do projects in classes, for example. As an undergraduate, you may have done several projects which require certain activities to be accomplished within certain time period, and it requires resources, effort, time, and so on. So how do you manage project? I'm going to give you very simple, very brief 20-second description of what it takes to manage a project. The first step is you describe the project in as much detail as possible, describing each activity and the sequential relationship and other constraints among those activities. And to better manage the project, they typically use network model, which is nothing but graphical representation of all the activities and precedence relationship and when you need to start the activities and so on. There are two broad approaches: activity on arc and activity on node. Typically, mid-level managers who focus on activities tend to use activity on node approach, the second approach, whereas the higher level managers, they are not really interested in activities per se, but they are interested in accomplishment, milestones, where they are in terms of accomplishing the project, and they use the first approach, which is activity is represented on arc and nodes represent events or milestones. So let me explain that. You see, a network diagram will look something like this, where you have nodes, which are the circles, and arc is the line connecting these circles. Nodes tend to draw your attention right away, and therefore AON approach, activity on node approach, is preferred by operations manager who are focusing on activities, okay, because that nodes typically draw your attention when you're looking at a network diagram. So we will only talk about AON approach in this class. Incorporating time estimates. There are two approaches to time estimates. Deterministic, you know that this activity will take exactly 3 weeks, or this activity will take exactly 7 weeks. That is deterministic. For certain, you know how long each activity will take. But in real world, it's more probabilistic, and they use 3 estimates. One is known as the most optimistic estimate. If everything works out fine, you will take 3 weeks to finish an activity. Most likely estimate, which is what is the likelihood that you will finish that activity in, say, maybe it will take 7 weeks. And most pessimistic estimate is if Murphy's law is in action, everything goes wrong and you will take 12 weeks to complete the activity. So you have 3 estimates: most likely, most optimistic, and most pessimistic, and there's a certain way you combine them to develop your probabilistic model. They use something known as beta distribution. Maybe more on that in next lecture, not in this one. Anyway, for this lecture we will only concentrate on the deterministic estimate. Once you have those things, your next job is to identify what is the critical path, which activities are most crucial for the completion of the project on time, and if you need to ever expedite or crash the project, you will have to work on those activities. Those activities require special attention. Okay, and develop project plan, assign people, assign resources, equipment, machines, whatever it takes, so that you can accomplish the project in a timely fashion. And finally, monitor and update the project. Constantly keep an eye on everything, and if something needs to be expedited, some resources have to be moved to different activities, you can constantly monitor and make those changes. So these are generic steps in managing a project. The AON approach uses a node which will incorporate 6 different pieces of information, and I will not spend much time on these 2 things because I will explain those things with an example. Again, they will have node name, earliest you can start an activity, earliest you can finish, latest you can start an activity, latest you can finish, and the duration of the activity. Right, and those things are defined here, and more definition which you can read later. Let's begin with a simple example, and this is a project where you have a construction project. Various activities have been defined and the duration they take, and the predecessors are listed. That means A can be done anytime, but B can only be done after you have done activity A. You can't put steel frame without foundation. C, flooring, follows B, and it takes 3 months. Do you see I'm moving across each line? Activity D, E, and F, they all follow C, task C, and so on. So let's begin with this example. All right. Notice I put down those time requirement and precedence relationship for your convenience on the same slide. And let's see. Let's begin with each node. Task A takes 2 months. B follows A. B follows A and takes 1 month. C follows B and takes 1 month. D, E, and F, they all follow C. D, E, and F, they all follow C and take 2, 4, and 2 weeks respectively. G follows F. H follows D, E, and G. And I follows H. So now you have the precedence diagram. Okay, and we'll fill out all the remaining missing pieces in those nodes. All right, so let's start filling out early start, early finish, and so on. So what is the earliest you can begin activity A? You can begin right now at the end of time period 0. And it takes 2 months. So what is the earliest you can finish activity A? At the end of month 2. B follows A. So when is the earliest you can begin activity B? At the end of month 2. And it takes 1 month. So you can finish it at 3. And begin C at the end of month 3 and complete that at the end of month 6. D, E, and F, they all follow C and they can all be started at 6 and completed respectively in the same fashion. You know what to do. Now this is where you need to be careful for H. What is the earliest you can begin activity H? The earliest you can begin is either 8, 9, or 10. What do you think is the answer? Is it 8? No, because if you put 8 there, remember activity E and G would not have been completed. Therefore, the earliest you can begin activity H when all preceding tasks are done, and that will happen at 10. So moving forward, whenever you have this kind of choice, you select the largest number. And you will complete this at 13, begin I at 13, and complete this by 17. If you are not told otherwise, you will assume that the latest you can allow the project to get completed is the same as the earliest completion time for the terminating task. So you will assume 17. But if I If I told you something else, you will use that number. Anyway, in this example, we will assume that the earliest you can finish, the latest you can finish, excuse me, the latest you can finish is 17. For that to happen, you must begin this activity latest by 13 because it takes 4 months. And for you to begin latest by 13, you should have completed H latest by 13 and should have started activity H latest by 10. And for H to start latest by 10, all the preceding tasks should be done by 10. So D, E, and F should all be completed at the latest by 10 each. And G should be started latest by 9, F should be completed latest by 9, started at 7, E should have started at 6, and D should have started at 8. Okay, now when is the latest you will allow C to get completed? Is it 6, 7, or 8? The answer is 8. No, answer is not 8. I just said it wrong. The answer is 6. When you are working backward, you have to select the smallest number. Okay? Because if you put down 8 there, what happens? You will complete activity C at 8. Can you begin F or E at 6 and 7? No. So you have to put down 6 here. Working backward, you always select the smallest number, and you can figure out the rest in this fashion. Now next we want to figure out, do you have any leeway? Do you have any leeway for each task? Let's look at A. What is the earliest you can begin? Time 0. What is the latest you can begin? Time 0. You have absolutely no slack or no leeway. The same is true for B. No leeway. 2 minus 2, or you can do 3 minus 3, which is same as 0. The early finish and latest finish, the difference is 0, or early start and latest start, difference is 0. They will always be equal. Let's look at D. You know, the earliest you can begin is 6 and latest you can begin is 8, and still you will complete the project within the specified period. And the difference is 2. 8 minus 6, or 10 minus 8. Okay. Task C similarly will have a slack of 0. E has a slack of 0. F, do you agree that has a slack of 1? The latest you can start is 7, earliest you can start is 6, so you have 1 month of leeway. You have a little bit of playroom. Okay, you can calculate the same 1 by subtracting 9 minus 9 and 8. 8 minus 9, 9 minus 8. And you can calculate these things. Now, we need to figure out which set of activities are the critical for managing the project. There are 2 ways to calculate this. One is to lay out all possible paths. So what I've done here is I have listed down all possible paths from start to end. And you will notice that there are 3 paths, A, B, C, and then go up, D, H, and I. Next is A, B, C, E, H, and I, and then finally A, B, C, F, G, H, I. And add all the activities along the path, and you will notice that A, B, C, E, H, I happens to be the longest path, and that is the critical path. The second way is basically you will have to look at the smallest slack here, which is 0, and there should be a continuous path from start to end connecting all activities with least slack, which is 0 in this case, and that will still be the same, A, B, C, E, H, I. By the way, you can have multiple critical paths. In this example you have only one, but if you have a complex problem, you can have multiple critical paths, and you have to manage those paths very carefully. So critical path in this example is A, B, C, E, H, and I. This is the path which you have to watch like a hawk because you have no leeway. You cannot get delayed. If you get delayed on any of these activities, your project will be delayed. Or conversely, if you need to expedite the project, you will have to crash or expedite or cut down the duration of one or more activities along this critical path. Just remember, whenever you crash an activity along the critical path, it is possible that some other path may become a bottleneck. Okay, so keep that in mind. Next, we are going to calculate free slack. Free slack is the amount of time by which you can delay an activity and still not affect any other activity. Okay, once again, this is a little bit of a difficult concept. You can delay an activity and not affect any other activity in any which way. So let's look at A. A has no slack, and therefore obviously there's no free slack. B has the same story. There's no slack, so there's obviously no free slack. Let's look at D. What is the earliest you can begin? 6. What is the latest you can begin and still complete the project? 8. You have slack of 2. Any of that is free slack? Well, think about this. If we start activity at 7, what is the earliest you can complete task? D. 9. Can you still start activity H by 10? Yes. Okay, so once again, how we calculate free slack is by looking at this number and looking at this number. Okay, so 10 minus 8, and the free slack is going to be 2. Okay, let's do the same thing for F, for example. Or we did G. G is going to be, again, if you look at this, you have 10 minus 9 is 1. So you have a free slack of 1. You can delay this by 1 month and not affect early start of this activity. Okay. C is obviously you have 6, 6, and 6. If there were different numbers, you'll pick the smallest, but in this case they're all 6, 6, 6. So 6 minus 6 will turn out to be 0. Next one. E. Obviously you're looking at 10 minus 10, free slack is 0. F. Now F is interesting. It has a slack of 1, but none of that is free, because if you delay this, you will affect early start of this. So difference between 8 and 8 is 0. So F has a slack of 1, but none of that is free. And free slack for H is going to be the same. 13 minus 13, free slack is 0. And by definition, free slack for last activity is 0. Notice, all the activities on the critical path, they have a free slack of 0. All the activities along the critical path, they have free slack of 0. Okay? But free slack of 0 does not mean an activity is on the critical path. Example, F. F has a free slack of 0, but this is not on the critical path. Okay? So by definition, you will notice that free slack for critical activity will always be 0. But this time, I'm giving you additional information that you have 20 months to complete the project. You have 20 months to complete the project. Alright, so we'll just follow along. You can begin at 0, complete at 2, task B 2, 3, C can start at 3 and 6. We did this before. And 6, 6, 8, 10, and so on. And you know that out here you will have 10, 13, 13, 17. By the way, these numbers, the top numbers don't change at all. The only number that will change is here. This is where you will use 20. And if you must finish this by 20, and it takes 4 months, you have to start activity I by 20 minus 4, which is 16. And H has to be completed by 16, started latest by 13, and so on. I'm assuming you can finish this on your own. Let's calculate slack and free slack. and you can calculate these numbers. I'm assuming you should not have any difficulty. What do you think will happen to free slack? If you recall, free slack was calculated by finding out the difference between this number and this number. You know, the early start of B minus early finish of A gave you free slack for A. The top numbers have not changed, and therefore free slack should not change. Okay, 2 minus 2, 0. 3 minus 3, 0. 6, 6, 6, smallest of these 6 is 6. 6 minus 6 will be 0. Oops, I calculated D first. Okay, D. 10 minus 8 is 2. So you have a total slack of 5, out of which free slack is 2. That means you can delay D by 2 months and you will not affect any other activity. But if you go beyond 2 months, you will affect other activities, but you will still accomplish the project within 20 months as long as you delay D by less than or equal to 5 weeks or 5 months in this case. Okay, free slack for G is going to be 10 minus 9. So, observation. Free slacks remain unchanged because top numbers did not change. Critical activities have free slack of 0, just like previous example. Okay, but as I pointed out earlier, free slack of 0 does not mean that activity is critical. Case in point, F has a free slack of 0, but that's not on the critical path. Okay, we'll do one more example. Example 3. This looks like a pretty simple example, right? You have only 6 activities. It doesn't look very complex. So let's begin. Okay. Again, I put down this information here. A has no predecessor, take 2 months. B follows A, takes 4 months or 4 time period. C follows A, takes 3 time period. D follows B and C, takes 17 months. E follows C, takes 9 time period, and F follows B and E, and takes 5 months. This is a bit confusing. It looks like there are 2 activities which are terminating, D and F. All right, let's begin filling out the information, and then we'll see how to handle this situation. Earliest you can begin A is 0, finish this at 2, begin B and C at 2, and complete them at 6 and 5 respectively. Now activity D can be started, you have a choice between 5 and 6, so obviously you select the bigger number as you move forward. You cannot begin D before 6, and you will complete this by 23. E can begin at 5, complete at 14. For F, you have a choice between 6 and 14. B ends at 6 and E ends at 14, so you take the bigger number, and that is 14, so 14 will go here. Okay, and you will complete this by 19. Now is the question, what is the latest finish time for F or D? Are you going to use 19 here and 23 here, or what? Well, it's confusion. To avoid this confusion, where you have more than 2 activity that feel like terminating activity, we use dummy activity, which kind of ties all the loose end together. We want to have just one terminating activity. Okay, so let's do a terminating activity. We added a dummy activity which takes no time, no resource time. It takes time 0. When is the earliest you can begin activity dummy? Well, you have a choice between 23 and 19. Okay, so obviously you will select 23. And when will you finish this latest by? 23 plus 0, 23. And if not told otherwise, you will assume that the latest you're allowed to complete this dummy activity is 23, and start this by 23. And now it's pretty obvious that these two activities should be completed latest by 23. So remember, there was a confusion whether 23 will go here or 23 or 19 will go here. Well, it looks like that 23 will go in both the places. Okay, so 23, 23, no confusion anymore, and you can work your number backwards. You must finish F by 23, so you must begin this latest by 18. D must be started latest by 6. E must be finished by 18 at the latest and started latest by 9. B, you have a choice of 6 and 18. 6 and 18, you will select smaller number working backward. B must finish latest by 6 and start by 2. But C, you again have a choice of 6 and 9. So the smallest number will go is 6. And C should start latest by 3. B should start latest by 2. And the choice here is 3 or 2. You will select the smaller number, 2. And you must begin activity A by A. And we can calculate slack. You've done this before. Look at E, for example, difference between 9 and 5 or 18 and 14 is 4. So you have a slack of 4 time period. F has a slack of 4, and obviously the dummy activity has a slack of 0. Now you can trace all possible paths. You know, there's one continuous path from start to end, A, B, D, E. The dummy has least slack along this path, so that is your critical path. Or you can enumerate all possible paths. So I didn't calculate free slack, so let me talk about free slack here very quickly. 2 minus 2 is 0. 5 and 6, you pick the smaller of the two. 5 minus 5 is 0. 23 minus 23 is 0. Free slack for E is 14 and 14, the difference is 0. Free slack here is 23 and 19, so difference is 4. And for the terminating activity, by definition, it is 0. Right, so enumeration, all possible path, A, B, F, dummy, and that length is going to be 2 plus 4 plus 5, which is 11. A, B, D, dummy, which is going to be 23 if you add these numbers along. 2 plus 4 plus 17 is going to be 2 plus 4, 6, and 20 and 17, 23, and plus 0. And next path is going to be A, C, D, dummy, and if you add these numbers, that would be 22. A, C, E, F, dummy, and that is 19. So the longest path is 23, which is the critical path. So critical path is A, B, D, dummy. Okay, that gives you 2 problems and should give you some understanding. Now let's briefly conclude this topic. In all projects, you have to watch out for those critical activities. You make sure you allocate resources, you allocate equipment, people, and manage them carefully, because if you don't, projects have a tendency to result in 2 overruns: cost overrun and time overrun. They need more money, they need more time, and bottleneck and critical, critical set of activities that's like a bottleneck that must be identified and managed carefully. Always develop backup plans. Contingency planning is very critical. Plan as much backup and contingency plan as you can. Of course, there may be situations that you would not have predicted but may happen, but that doesn't mean that you do not do contingency planning. Plan as much as you can. Who will be your supplier? Who will be alternate supplier? Are you going to give it to subcontractor? If subcontractor fails, do you have a backup subcontractor? And finally, there's a crashing analysis. If you need to expedite the project, you need to figure out what is the best way to expedite, because crashing some activities take more money than crashing another. Expediting some activities will be cheaper than others. So you have to develop a plan as to how will you go about expediting the project if need be. That concludes our discussion. Good luck.